Welcome back. When we last left off, I was laying all the full pavers. Because I'm only one man with limited time in the evenings, I was able to finish them in a week. This meant each day I would lay around 30 of them. Now that the simple part was over, it was time to cut all the smaller pieces to fit into the gaps. The straight cuts were very straightforward, but the curved cuts, they were not. I started with the paver that would fit around the downpipe for the gutter. This required a 90mm round notch. I measured where the center of the pipe would land and then used a piece of 90mm coupling to mark the cut. The trick to cutting a curve with a circular disc is to angle the disc around the curve. The problem with this method is you can't get the blade very deep into the cut, but as long as you can score the top layer, then the sand will cover any imperfections below that. Once the curve was cut, I made lots of straight cuts inside that line, from above and below, and used a hammer and chisel to chip the pieces out. This was a very slow process, but worth the extra time. After that, I had to make a curved cut around the old drain. To cut the required shape, I traced a line onto a piece of cardboard. I then cut that shape out and transferred it onto the pavers. It took some time lining up the template because it spanned 3 pavers, but all my initial cuts were a bit shy, so I could creep up onto the line after test fitting. After all the cuts were done, I was on the home stretch. I started by sweeping some dry sand into all the joints. I plan on using Pavset later, a sand gel compound that hardens when wet. But to fill the majority of the gaps, I used the much cheaper option. The sand is there to keep the gaps between the pavers, but also to slide into any gaps underneath the pavers. So the first 20 kg bag disappeared pretty quick. Before doing the next bag, I hired a compactor for a few hours. This was a tiny unit that I could fit into my little car. I attached a small carpet underneath the compactor to protect the pavers from the metal base. This also did a very good job of cleaning the pavers. I staked some timbers and that heavy piece of steel against the exposed edge to stop the last pavers being pushed outwards as the inner pavers moved. Then I spread out the bag of Pavset. This would get swept into the gaps, but also helps the compactor slide more easily. As soon as the compactor set off, that first bag of sand disappeared. I ran it over the whole surface 4 times, and at that stage the sand stopped disappearing. So I grabbed the hose and lightly sprayed the surface. A couple days later and the Pavset had gone hard, so I removed the timber and got to work on the haunching. I cut some very thin rebar to the length of each edge. This is a fairly cheap rebar, but makes a big difference as it binds the concrete in one long stretch and reduces the chance of it cracking. I spread a layer of concrete, then added the rebar to it. This ensures that the steel is encased in concrete so it won't rust. If rebar rusts while it's in the concrete, it'll crack. Then I spread another layer over the rebar and sloped it down away from the pavers. This helps any water to run off into the garden bed. I left around 20mm of paver exposed, so once the mulch is spread out, it'll cover the concrete. And then that was it, all done. This is the first time I've attempted a paving job like this, and while I have to say it was a lot of work, both mentally and physically, I can definitely say it was worth it. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below and I will get to them. So that's how you lay pavers. If I can, you can. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and click that thumbs up, and if you haven't already, I would love for you to subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you guys soon.